Hi, my name is Nelson, and this is the Sir Nelson online English channel. The title of the book is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Chapter 8, Joy and Despair. Before we read the chapter, let us first look at the new words that we are going to find in the story. Our first new word is jeer. Jeer means to laugh or shout insults at someone to show you have no respect for them. For example, that young girl is jeering at the boy. Jeering, teasing, laughing, shouting, abusing, all those ones are forms of jeering. Cruel. Cruel means extremely unkind, someone who is very, very unkind and unpleasant and causing pain to people or animals intentionally. Such a person is said to be cruel. In the picture, the boy is cruel and the girl is kind. Cheer. Cheer is different from jeer. Jeer means shouting, abusing, insulting. Cheer is the opposite, to give a loud shout of approval or encouragement. For example, if there is a football match, the fans can shout, can make noise. That is called cheering. The purpose of cheering is to encourage the other person to continue doing what they are doing. Summon. Summon means to order someone to come to or be present at a particular place or to officially arrange a meeting of people. If you are called for any kind of meeting, that is a summon. But many times with a summon, you are forced. You must come. For example, if you are called at the police, it is a must. That is a summon. Hiss. The word hiss means to make a noise like a long S sound, like a snake. That is called hiss. Chapter 8, Joy and Despair. Joy means happiness, despair means sadness. The other synonym of the word despair is sadness or unhappy. Chapter 8, Joy and Despair. The prisoner, Evermore, was summoned to appear before the tribunal. Summoned means called. Who was called? Charles Danny. Who was Charles Danny? The prisoner, Evermore. Most of the prisoners who had been tried there were already dead. And the tribunal was feared because of its passion for the death sentence. That tribunal, which earlier on in the earlier videos, we said that a tribunal is a court which is formed to try special cases. Most of the people who appeared before the tribunal were killed. Like I told you earlier, A Tale of Two Cities is a book written to show the situation in France during the French Revolution. In the earlier days of the revolution, the people who won, the poor people who became the leaders, revenged. They killed most of the rich and the people who were in government. But before killing them, they brought them before the tribunals or courts of law. And many people were given the death sentence. A sentence is a punishment given to someone in a prison. For example, when you go to court, they can say, go to prison for 2 years. That is called a sentence. Or the court can give you a death sentence, meaning you have to die. Now, the prisoner Evermond appeared before the tribunal. Charles Danny looked around him in confusion when he entered the court. The judges sat on a bench at one end of the hall. A hall is a big room. They could be seated in a very big hall, a very big room, and the rest of the space was taken by a crowd of jeering, laughing people who watched the evidence being given. In that tribunal, the people were allowed to be there, and many of them were jeering, were insulting, were abusing, because they hated the people who were being brought before the tribunal. Remember, earlier on, people were treated badly. The Marquis of Evermond, if you remember, the poor people were treated very badly. Now, after the revolution, the poor people revenged. So when they brought these leaders to the tribunal, the people jeered, they laughed at them, they spat at them. The crowd commented loudly on everything that was said. Everything the judges and lawyers said, the people or the crowd said something. They cheered when they had something they liked, and hissed when they had something they did not like. When they had something they did not like, they could hiss. And then they could cheer when, hooray, when they had something that they liked. The crowd knew the name of Evermond, and they hissed at the prisoner when he came forward. Remember, the Evermond family was hated in Paris because they treated people very badly. At the beginning of the story, remember the story of the Marquis riding through the city, knocking the boy dead, and everything that he did. So because of that, the people in Paris, they hated the Evermond family. So when they brought someone from the Evermond family, they hissed. Hissing is a sign of disapproval. Is a sign that you don't like that person. There were cries of death to the enemy of the Republic and take off his head. People wanted to cut off the head of Charles Danny. Then the evidence began. The prisoner admitted who he was. He said that he had always been opposed to the cruelties of the old system. The old system before the revolution was very cruel, was very unkind. They treated the poor people very badly. But Charles Danny was opposed to them. And indeed, it is true. That is why he's called Charles Danny. He changed his name because he never wanted to be associated with the Evermond family. His family had a bad reputation in France. So he decided to run away to England. But remember, he came back to save the life of a loyal servant. That's when he was arrested and taken to the tribunal. He said that he had not wanted to benefit from his properties in France after the death of his uncle, the Marquis. He never wanted to benefit. After the death of the Marquis of Evermond, he decided to run away. He had been working for a living in England. He gave the names of the two witnesses who would support what he said. In court, you need witness. A witness is someone who comes to court and says what you are saying is true, or he was there when something was being done. Gabelle and Alexander Manette. Gabelle, remember, was the family, the Evermond family, servant, and Dr. Manette, of course. The crowd in the court cheered at the name of Dr. Manette. Dr. Manette, remember, had spent many years in prison. So the people knew him. The old system treated Dr. Manette in a very, very bad way. He was imprisoned at the Bastille for very many years. So he was part of the suffering people. This is why people cheered. Now, Dr. Alexander Manette was called in to provide the evidence as a witness. His story was a famous one, and he was a hero in their eyes. Almost everyone there knew the story of Dr. Manette. Of course, we read about that story. He was imprisoned for nothing. When the prisoner added that he was married to Dr. Manette's daughter, the attitude of the crowd softened towards him. So the people who were jeering now began to cheer. They began cheering because Dr. Manette was one of them. Charles Danny had married the daughter of Dr. Manette. So according to the crowd, he was part of them. Gabel was called to give evidence, and he confirmed what the prisoner had said about his inheritance. Inheritance means taking the property of someone who is dying, who has died. When someone dies and you take that property, that's called inheritance. Evermond had never benefited from his land or property in France. He left them with Gabel and ran away to England to find a new life. Evermond had come back to France after Gabel, had written to him asking for help. Remember, Charles Danny had married Lucy and they were happy in England. Then Gabel wrote a letter to him asking him to come to Paris to save his loyal servant. Again, the crowd cheered when they had this evidence. At first they were jeering, but now they were cheering because they were hearing what they wanted to hear. Now it was Dr. Manette's turn to speak. He said that the prisoner had always been his friend. The prisoner lived in England, but was not a friend of the aristocratic regime there. Aristocratic is the ruling class, the king, the queen, and their family. That is the aristocratic regime. Dr. Manette told them that Charles Danny was not even a friend of the leaders of England. He had even been tried for treason by the English. Remember, at the beginning of the book, it began with the trial of Charles Danny. Charles Danny is always in problems. But at that time, remember, he was saved. How? Remember the story of Sidney Carton. He told them that he was charged of treason by the English. Treason means doing something bad against your government. The doctor spoke calmly. Calmly means relaxed, with no emotion, and clearly. And the crowd was convinced by what he told the court. They began to shout, "Free the prisoner and let him go." The crowd wanted the tribunal to free Charles Danny because of the witnesses, the evidence provided by Dr. Manette and Gabel. Before we continue, let us learn the new words that we are going to meet in the second part of the story. Our first new word is embrace. To embrace means an act of putting your arms around somebody as a sign of love or friendship. In the picture, the two people, the woman and the man and the lady, are embracing. You put hands around around somebody as a sign of love or friendship. Convince means to make somebody or yourself believe that something is true. If someone tells you words and you believe, he or she has convinced you. When you are a woman and a man uses words to tell you and then you fall in love with him, the man has convinced you. You have believed his words. Accompany means to travel or go somewhere with somebody or something. For example, the children are accompanying their parents. Acquit. Acquit means to decide and state officially in court that somebody is not guilty of a crime. You go, they provide evidence. For example, at the beginning, we saw that one at the beginning of the story. Charles Danny was acquitted. He had no problem. Why? Remember, during that trial in London, in England, Sidney Carton looked exactly like Charles Danny. So according to court, maybe the people never saw Charles Danny. Maybe they saw Sidney Carton. So he was acquitted. It means he was not guilty. The judges were also convinced by the evidence of Dr. Manet. They were convinced, so they believed that Dr. Manet was telling the truth. They gave their verdict. A verdict is a decision. They gave their decision acquitted. Charles Danny was acquitted a second time. So he was left to go because of the evidence provided by by Dr. Manet and Gabel. The prisoner Evermond was carried out of the court by the joyful crowd, by the happy crowd. They were so happy, who had been calling for his death only a short while before. They were jeering and calling for the court to cut off his head, but now they were very happy and they carried him in the streets. He was embraced and cheered. They put arms around him to congratulate him and cheered and then placed in a chair and paraded in the streets. He moved in the streets like a hero. The excited crowd escorted him to Dr. Manet's house. To escort is to accompany. They went with him to Dr. Manet's house. Mr. Lorry was there to welcome him, as was Miss Pross. Remember, Miss Pross was their servant who had accompanied them to Paris. Miss Pross was Dr. Manet, Lucy Manet, and Charles Danny's servant in England. When they traveled to come and rescue Charles Danny, she accompanied them. They came together. And Jerry Cruncher. You remember Jerry Cruncher? Jerry Cruncher, the messenger from Tellson's bank. Lucy, Charles Danny's wife, and the doctor were waiting for him inside the house. Charles Danny greeted Mr. Rory and Miss Pross hurriedly. Hurriedly means quickly, and then went into the house to join his wife. Who is his wife? Lucy Manet. Who is Lucy Manet? Dr. Manet's daughter. He embraced her. He put his arms around her to show love. Of course, they were in love, husband and wife. And tears fell from Lucy's face. Danny held his wife for a few minutes, and then he said, "We must speak to your father, my dear. No other man in France could have done what he did. Dr. Manet had saved him. No other man would have saved me as he did." The doctor was proud of what he had done. He had promised Lucy that he would save her husband, and he had succeeded. There was no trace of weakness in the old man's features now. He was calm and confident. We go to our last part. But before that, let us look at the new words we might find here. Shrug. Shrug means to raise your shoulders. These are called shoulders. To raise your shoulders and then drop them. Raise, drop. Raise, drop. Shrug means raise your shoulders and then drop them to show that you don't know. I don't know. Usually you also frown your face. I don't know. You don't know or care. I don't care about something. That is called shrug. Like the gentleman in the picture is shrugging. Accuse means to say that somebody has done something wrong or is guilty of something. For example, in the trial, Charles Danny was accused of doing bad things during the old system. Okay, our last part of chapter 8. Soon afterwards, Mr. Lorry returned to his office at Tellson's bank. Mr. Lorry returned to his bank at Tellson's bank. And Jerry and Miss Pross went out to do some shopping for the family. Dr. Manette, Danny, and Lucy sat quietly together, talking over everything that had happened. They had not been talking for very long when they heard footsteps. They heard someone walking in the street outside. Lucy went very pale. She became angry. Her skin, the color of his skin, of her skin changed. "Soldiers!" she cried. "Hide Charles, father, hide him." After being acquitted, now the soldiers had come to the house. What had they come for? "Be quiet," Lucy, her father, replied. "Charles is safe. I have saved him. We have nothing to fear." The father tried to comfort her, to encourage her. The doctor went to the door to see what was happening. 4 men armed with pistols, 4 men holding pistols pushed past him into the house. "Where is Evermont, also called Danny?" one of them asked roughly. Danny stood up. "I am Evermont," he told the man quietly. "What do you want?" You are under arrest," the man told him. "You must come with us." Remember, Charles Danny had been acquitted because of the evidence provided by Gabel and Dr. Manette. But when he reached home, 4 soldiers came and they arrested him. Why did they arrest him? Tell me why I'm under arrest," Danny asked quietly. You'll know soon enough," one of the men replied. "Now, you must come with us." Dr. Manette stepped forward and asked them, "Do you know who I am?" "We know you, Dr. Manette," the men said respectfully. They respected Dr. Manette. "Then tell me, why is he under arrest?" the doctor asked. "He has been accused of Citizen Defarge and Madame Defarge." Remember Mr. Defarge and Madame Defarge? They were the leaders of the revolution. They were the leaders of the crowd that stormed the Bastille. They released the prisoners. So now Mr. Defarge and Madame Defarge were accusing. They say that Charles Danny had done something wrong. And by one other person as well. 3 people were accusing Charles Danny. We know that two, Mr. and Madame Defy. Who was the third person? Who? Asked the doctor. Who is the third person? Dr. Manet was asking. The men looked at Dr. Manet in surprise for a moment. They were surprised that Dr. Manet was asking who the third person was. There was an awkward silence. Awkward means embarrassment, ashamed. They could not believe it. Why? Later on, we shall find out that the third person who is accusing Charles Danny was actually Dr. Manet. This is why the soldiers looked awkward. They were surprised that Dr. Manet didn't know that he was the same person who was accusing Charles Danny. You don't know who it was? One of them asked. No, I don't, the doctor replied. Indeed, he didn't know, like we shall see later. The other man shrugged and told him, you will know tomorrow. The soldiers took Danny into custody. Custody means in safe hands, and marched him off to prison. His new trial was set for the following day. Charles Danny was back in court, was back in the tribunal. This is the third time that he was being tried. The first time was in England. Now the second time was in Paris, but he was acquitted. Now, Mr. and Madame Defarge plus another person are accusing him. They are accusing him of what? We shall see in the next chapter. See you next time. Bye-bye.